Well, hi everyone, and welcome to those of you listening and watching. And thank you so much to our distinguished panelists for joining us at this incredibly difficult time of a difficult semester at the end of a difficult year. So let's find out who our panelists are. I'll just go around according to the rectangles on my Zoom screen and just ask you to introduce yourself to our viewers. So let's start with you, Ted.
Hi, I'm Ted Stankwich. I'm an associate professor in biological sciences and the director of the Mammal Lab, and we study the evolution of predator-prey interactions in mammals.
Terrific, and your background is sensational, so welcome. Laura Stevens.
Hi, I'm Laura Stevens. I'm a professor in geological sciences, and my research is focused on paleoclimatology and paleoclimatic reconstructions.
Wonderful, wonderful to have you here. And my goodness, couldn't imagine anything more relevant to the current day than learning about the Earth's climate. So welcome. And Christine?
I'm Christine McCraft. I'm a professor in biological sciences and the director of environmental science and policy program here. And I run the Wetland Ecology Lab, where we study the impact of human activities on how wetlands look and how they function.
Wonderful, how exciting. And Tiani.
My name is Tiani Zhao. I'm a faculty from the Department of Mathematics and Statistics, and I'm a statistician.
Oh, great. Well, I can't say that I'm not delighted to hear it, and it's so great to finally meet you, or at least meet you in a little rectangle. Welcome, Tiani. For those of you who don't know, who are watching, I'm also a statistician, and so that's a happy thing for me. Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Kissel. I'm a professor in science education, and I also am oversee the Science Learning Center, which is kind of an outreach space or project for the Science Education Department and the College of Natural Sciences.
Fantastic. Welcome, Jim. And Laura Henriquez.
Hi, I'm Laura Henriquez. I'm also a professor in science education. I'm the director of the Young Scientist Camp, and most of my work recently has been around faculty development, either pre-faculty people or faculty on our own campus.
Well, that's a great segue, Laura. Welcome to talk about the last tumultuous year of COVID, or now more than a year, good heavens. Because if you think about it, how much development, if you want to call it that, how much change has happened for faculty and students and, of course, administrators and staff in the last year. What do you think was the most striking thing for you about the introduction of alternative mode of instruction at the last March with the COVID pandemic?
For me personally, I think it was, it made me really appreciative for what I have. I don't have children. I have a big enough house that my husband and I can be working from home in different rooms. We have bandwidth for the internet, and I could spend all of that last March figuring out how to teach online and pivoting to do that, and not worrying about teaching my children at the same time that they're trying to do it. So it was overwhelming initially, but I also felt so grateful and appreciative for what I do have, and made me in awe of the Herculean task that others had to deal with.
Absolutely. There's so many gradations of experience, but still, I think all of us are relatively fortunate. Others in our community have not been, but that's great to hear. How about you, Tiani? You sort of relatively new to the beach. What was your experience of this very strange and exotic change?
Well, COVID-19 and alternative modes of instruction made me realize that many of our students need help. Every time I make an accommodation for students in class, for example, gave them a little bit extra time for a homework assignment, and I receive thank you emails from students who then begin to tell me about their personal and family struggles during this difficult time. then I realized that I have to accept the reality that for some students, my class, it's just not the highest priority of their life right now. And then at the beginning, I saw that, oh, we're here just building online courses or converting our face-to-face courses to online learning. However, over time, I realized that what we're doing here is we're trying to extend a sense of care to our students and trying to build a community that's going to be able to work together to get through the learning challenges that we have.
That's an amazing insight, I think. And I mean, for me, and I'm sure for all of us, education, which is what we're involved in, is about relationships. And the relationships we build face to face are different from the relationships we need to build on screen. But still, I don't think effective education can happen without that meeting the person, the real person, where they are, and that has been transformational. So very, very insightful comment. Thanks. Ted, how about for you? I mean, quite a lot, I imagine, of what you do is showing people, having them put hands on things. That must have been an almost Herculean task, as Laura called it. So what about it?
Yeah, so for me, it's been a moving. The goalposts keep moving, throughout the last year, and so when we first went into lockdown back in March, my mammalogy lab, which I teach every semester, students are in the classroom holding skulls and bones and skins and learning and turning them around, so the thought I had thought about trying to make videos where we're showing them and doing everything myself and just having them learn virtually. And I made the decision that was not going to be the best way. It's not going to be an effective way to teach this kind of thing. And how can I test on it too, like without sort of pointing out things that they're supposed to know to look for. So I made the decision to entirely switch my lab to being techniques based. And so they know this last year that they've done very little with actual specimens. Everything has been about what do mammalogists do in the field? How do we use GPS technology? How do we do trapping and mark recapture and population analyses? And so everything has been, instead of, we didn't cover a lot of that in my original class, but now the students are learning what actually we do in the field and how in these analytical techniques. So I had to, bone up on that myself, obviously, and write entire new labs over the summer, and it's been fairly successful. There's been some hiccups here and there and some missteps, but overall it's been pretty good. But I'm certainly looking forward to being back in person in the fall to get back into the lab to work with these materials, and the students are too. And I've told all my students that, if you're still around or want to come back and take a tour of what we have, I'd be happy to show you around and get that experience. So yeah, it's been a tough go.
It's what you describe for the tactile, hands-on, looking at things that so often accompanies learning in the sciences must have been sort of just super difficult. And I can only imagine, having struggled with anatomy myself, how impossible it would have been to try to learn it at a distance. But quite fascinating. Talking of distance, I mean, I know, Laura and Christine and probably all of you are doing a lot of, or typically do a lot of field work. You go out and look at things, you take your classes out into the world and expose them to the things you're doing. Laura, have you been doing that? Have you been?
So no, I have kind of a mixed thing between Tiani and Ted in terms of some of the challenges that I face. So because of family circumstances, I couldn't risk going out to work with the students directly in the field, but that's one of the things that geologists do on a regular basis. We show them things, but we also teach them how to do things in the field. And then, as Tiani said, that is when geology students really blend as a cohort. They really come together and they develop these really tight-knit communities that they persist the rest of their lives. I have students 10 years out that still hang out with their cohort. So missing all of that. So one of the things that I did during the summer was, this was Herculean, Laura. I created the entire geologic history of a fictitious country. The rocks, everything. And I spent
this
hours.
Sounds like a game to me, Laura. I think you should patent it and sell it.
I named it Shangri-La. So they were mapping Shangri-La and had to interpret it. So I put them out in pairs and they mapped in pairs in this fictitious country. And they had packets of hand samples that were just pictures of rocks that I found on the internet. And over the course of the entire semester, they basically built up their skills so that they could write a geologic history of this region as a group, as a class. They came together and kind of pulled it all together. It worked phenomenally well. And now that it's kind of in the, constructed it, I will probably keep doing it. And that was a real gift of COVID, because I actually think that in many ways it worked more effectively than taking them out in the field where they're distracted by other things. They're hot, they're tired, they're hungry. So.
How interesting. And, you bring up such an interesting point, which is through this crisis, obviously some good things have popped up. And, Ted suggests it should be called shale gralia. Okay, we'll sort of we'll let the legal team work on the actual name. But I'm sure, we're all dying, or at least I'll speak for myself. I'm dying to get back to face-to-face interactions, but there's certainly things we've learned in the period that we can use going forward, and that's a classic example. Wow, it's can I play it? Can I do it? I'd love to do it.
I'll send this whole group. You guys can map together as a team.
Okay, we'll see if we can pass your class, Laura. I doubt it, but Christine, you also are a field work, going out and seeing. What's your experience been?
Yeah, I think similar to what you heard from a lot of people. I mean, the challenges of getting students to participate, I would say, has intensified when we've been online. And we hear that from not just us, but I think across the levels. And so for me, the passion of our environmental and upper division biology students comes from getting outside. And it was a little bit of a challenge to figure out, how do you keep that passion in cohort building and interactions that we take for granted into the world when they can't go outside. We did receive permission to do 3 carefully structured field trips for the environmental science graduating seniors this spring. And that was with collaboration with our safety and risk management teams, as well as the students, to figure out what did that look like. We divided them into small teams, and they only functioned with those 4 people that were the group of 4 to collect their field work. And we had a lot of, we now have environmental science and policy masks, which sort of gave them a little bit more of the team spirit, I think. And we came up with clever ways to collect data. So we have the person collecting the data is talking to their teammate on the phone, right? So they're reading out the points, and then that keeps people separate. Or we're doing it in ways that the data sets become more integrated across the class. So if I collect data with my team, I make that open to the whole team, with the idea that we could use collaboration to reinforce the connections that they're not getting face-to-face, but to demonstrate how important collaboration is in science and how we can still get out in the field. Because I think for many of them, that missing piece of feeling like you could do what you were passionate about in your field was really challenging to their motivation. And so even just to have 3 short field trips for us in the spring, I think brought back some of the passion, some of working together, some reason why you're collaborating. And I think that hopefully, you know, as we start to pivot away from some of the online, we remember the collaboration and the parts that were fun about doing the alternative modes.
Yeah.
And bring them back into the environment.
Yeah. So it's kind of a both and story. And it's, you know, what has impressed me about your stories, as it in fact has impressed me by all several thousand of our faculty, is how incredibly flexible you've been in taking, you know, a gigantic 40,000 student university and in 3 weeks converting it into an entirely different kind of university while preserving as much as you could of the joy, the passion, the love, the exploration of, in your case, science, but in general of everything. It's quite amazing. It's an amazing story. I hope somebody tells it someday. Jim, as a science educator, how have you experienced this?
It's really been an interesting, I would say, an interesting learning experience. I mean, one of the groups that we work with in science ed are people that are going to be future elementary teachers, and they're good students, but they're not. How should I say? Science is not their favorite subject. So part of our goal in that class is to help them using hands-on activities and other things as part of their capstone class, is to kind of help them like, look, you can do science. Science is cool. It's not this potentially scary thing that you didn't like in high school, or that you had a bad experience, you know, as a freshman or something like that. And that's been really interesting to try to figure out how to get them engaged. And again, I would say, as some of my colleagues said, the missing that sort of facial reaction, even just how students react to things for that class, I really depended heavily on that. And so it's been a little bit of a challenge. You know, we've certainly tried to do things like, we spent summer and winter break compiling kits of materials. We put all these little doodads and things together that we would send to the students, so they would at least have that. So it gave them, it removed one more barrier to being able to sort of engage in the science. And then we use them in class. And I think some of the students appreciated having that element there. But yeah, I wish I had a better sense of my students. I mean, I think they're all, and again, back to what Tiani said, you know, the stories that I hear from students and the challenges they're dealing. I remember a student last fall who had 2 little kids in, one was in preschool, one was kindergarten. She was taking the class herself. The kids are running around the back, and yet she was engaged every day. And so just that dedication from some of these students, you know, across the board has just been amazing, especially in light of challenges they've had, right? I had a student the other day that says she's been taking her class in her car because there's too much happening in her classroom or in her home. And so she just goes out to her car where it's nice and quiet and just does her class from there. So, you know, I'm constantly amazed at what these students are doing, and I really wish I was able to connect with them more. But you know, you do what you can, I guess. And my hope is that they still walk away from the class not being totally fearful, if you will, of talking about science or teaching science. And I'm hopeful that they will be. So.
You know, that's an interesting point, very optimistic outlook, in fact, you know, and I think to some extent I agree with you. You know, there's a mutuality about learning, which I mentioned, the relationship, and the fact that I think students have been able to see their instructors as a little bit more human and less, you know, practiced and perfect and polished as we all are in face-to-face, given that we've done it for a while. And suddenly we're doing this new thing, and how do you do that, and how do you mute yourself? And so in a way, you or at least for me, I'll speak for myself, I've exposed my inabilities, and that helps relationships. And so certainly
I was going to say, Brian, and the addition of pets and children who's wander in and out of the Zoom screen has also helped us be more human, us to them and them to us.
I think that's true, and well, I mean, I was thinking the other day, just on a philosophical note, of how relatively short it's been in human history that we have gone out of the home to work. I mean, for most of human history, people have lived and worked at home, often in agriculture. You wake up and you go out to your field and then you come home. But there hasn't been this sharp separation of, home and work. So maybe we're just going back to an older pattern. But I actually want to talk about something that students often don't realize, is that at the same time as you, the faculty members, have completely pivoted to adapt your teaching, you've also done that to adapt your research. The three things that faculty do at universities are teaching, research, and service. And all those things have required massive pivoting, especially by scientists and people who can't just sit in their offices and think. And I mean, I'll start with you, Tiani, because I mean, I know as a statistician, I can do quite a lot of my research at home or in the library or in my office. How has it been for you?
It has been wonderful, actually. Like you said, I can pretty much do everything at home on my computer. Right. So in the past few years, I have delved into the fields of educational data mining. Specifically, I have collaborated with many faculty members on various student timely graduation and student success projects. And these projects serve as one of the key elements to realizing Cal State Long Beach's commitment to student success, including improved four-year graduation rates and decreased dropout rates. And massive amounts of information that exists in our data sets need to be extracted and analyzed in order to allow us to identify students' needs, goals, and the challenges that they face in earning a degree at Cal State Long Beach, and a better understanding of our students, their needs, and their experiences will allow the campus to implement more effective programs and services and identify groups of students who will benefit from specific types of support. But that has been very meaningful for me.
I specifically asked you first because I figured that you would get a kind of, hey, that's a surprising answer, kind of, like everyone's expecting, oh God, it was terrible. And for statisticians, we sit in front of our computers and it doesn't really matter where. But let's sort of go to another aspect of things. Who wants to kind of okay, Jim. tell us the alternative.
Well, so there's been such a strong emphasis on getting our teaching up and our teaching going and doing these pivoting that it's been really difficult to make the time to do the sorts of things that I would normally do with regards to research. So it's hard. It's been hard for me to make sure that my classes are as good as they can be, knowing they won't be close to what they were before. And so that just takes extra time, which means there's less time for other things. And then if you put service in there, the research kind of gets pushed into a smaller pile. And that's been frustrating. But at some point in time, it's either letting something kind of take less priority, or it's collapsing or going crazy, or jumping into the river or something like that, right?
Don't do that. Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful, and again, even though I have research projects that I can do without going out and interviewing folks and talking with educators, it's just been tough to maintain that focus in light of everything else that we're trying to do. So
yeah, sure is an extra burden, no doubt. Ted, your thoughts, your experiences?
Yeah, so it's been a mixed bag. We have both field and lab aspects to what we do, and obviously the field stuff has been less disruptive. Although I had one grad student who was not allowed back at her field site because of the parks restrictions on volunteers being there doing research, and so she had to, after waiting for like 4 months, had to totally abandon her the project and switch to a new one. So that was disruptive to her. But otherwise, most of our the projects have not been continued to go on, and we got some great data. The biggest thing has been a slowdown. I think that obviously for the first few months, people couldn't do a lot of things, especially in the lab. But the biggest issue has been not only the faculty, but the students have to catch up with this world and have to pivot to online teaching, and their time was taken up that they would normally have been doing research. So students that might have graduated in the fall or in early spring, might have been delayed a few more months because of the extra time that they had to take as well. So ultimately, we didn't lose a lot. We didn't lose a lot of time, but there were delays. And thankfully, in our college, our dean and our associate deans did a good job of sort of getting us back into the lab and out into the field pretty quickly, so safely, which is super important as well. And so it hasn't been that bad. I know other institutions have had a lot worse than we have. So overall, we're on track. It's just delayed some students a little bit.
I'm delighted to hear it, because I know working with Dean Bennett and other deans actually to try to, I wouldn't say push back against public health, but to insist on how crucial, being in the lab for a lab scientist is. It was, as you say, not ideal, but we did manage to get some of that going, and hopefully enough to kind of take us through. And, for students who are watching, or indeed anyone else, those of you who are worried about the additional time that you might need, we're all aware of that and sympathetic, and, we're doing whatever we can to support you. So rest assured about that. Christine, Laura?
Thanks, Christian. I'm like Ted. I have a field and a lab component, and unlike Ted, my research came basically to a complete halt. And part of that had to do with the family situation where I had an at-risk person at home and couldn't risk certain activities. But it was also partly just really strange stuff. So unlike a lot of my colleagues, my field sites aren't in California or even remotely in California, like they're in other countries. So there was no field travel at all to those. I mean, we just shut that down. And then the other piece to it was one of the big buildings in CSNM got renovated, and it was planned and renovated before COVID started, and it went through COVID, which I was grateful for, because we had to shut those labs down, and it was what we call a hard shutdown, which means every instrument was turned off, all electricity was turned off, and everything was covered up. And we expected to be able to get it all going again in the summer, but of course we were in COVID restrictions. So we're just now bringing, or trying to bring, with limited success, some of the instrument back online. So without that, there was, it was reading papers and thinking about things, but which is science too, very important science, but the actual collecting of data, there was none. I haven't collected a piece of data for over a year. Yeah.
As a statistician, that brings pain to my heart, I can tell you, Laura. So
Yeah.
That's actually something that I really am quite concerned about, Laura, is that even though we have kind of got through the immediate crisis, I suspect that this pandemic is going to have long tails, in the sense that, you know, this is still going to be affecting you and your students 3 years hence.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm aware of it. I'm sure most people are aware of it, but it's important for us to communicate that now that the pandemic is over, doesn't mean we immediately resume our status quo ante.
It's maybe going to be over for us a little bit sooner than it would be some of my colleagues in other countries. So, I mean, even if we can go back into the lab, I'm still going to be restricted from my ability to go to my research sites. So,
yeah, so for
Well,
sure.
and one other thing that we're seeing too, a lot of my research is related to science museums and what people are doing in those spaces and how people learn in those spaces. And that element has been shut down, right? Because those institutions have all been closed. Not only that, several of our graduate students who are educators in those spaces no longer have jobs, because as they were shut down, they were basically let go. And so they're within that sector, that sort of nonprofit, you know, learning sector, it's going to have kind of this ripple effect that's going to last for a while, you know, like we see in some of the, you know, like very similar to what Laura's dealing with, and the fact that there's just not active. So.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Let's go to Christine and then Laura.
Sure. I mean, I also, like you heard from Ted, felt grateful and a little stressed in the beginning that my projects kept going. Several of my projects were essential contracts with the Navy, and they did not shut down for COVID. So we had to get special permission to have field teams under very limited capacities be able to continue that. And so on one hand, I was delighted because, having been in the house for months, the ability to go out and feel safe and work with my students face to face was really, I felt lucky. At the same time, I also felt like I was a little bit back being a graduate student, because anything to do to prep for that or to clean up afterwards, only I did it. Only I had permission to be on campus. So it was a mixed bag. I mean, overall, I was very grateful because my projects could continue. Being outside felt safe. But I think the take home for us has been sort of we study coastal resilience, meaning the ecosystems. But I've also been impressed by the resilience of my graduate students and my undergraduate students who found ways to make it work. You know, we couldn't hand equipment back, so we floated in kayaks, and one of my students passes things back on a pulley system. Wow. You know, and just like people, I mean, what gives me hope in it, I think, is the same thing in there, is like people rise to the challenge, right? I mean, I think my take home was I felt very grateful that I had a field program that could go out. And I was super impressed by the ability of land managers and graduate students and undergraduates to pivot to figure it out, because we were able to keep collecting data. A lot of that will be sorted through for the next 5 years on a timescale that's different than we envisioned. But I think that I also realize the importance of like the lab connections and all of that into helping people feel important and part of the world. So we've managed to keep that going. Students have kept graduating out of our programs and getting their masters and getting their undergraduates, and hopefully finding some way to find their space in the science and the research. So that has made me, you know, feel both sad for what we lost, but grateful for what we kept, I think.
Well, that's an incredible gamut of things, and thank you for sharing. It's Laura, what about for you?
I don't know that I have anything different to share than my colleagues. I mean, I think the long-term effects, there will be a ripple. And, you know, Jim's talking about the informals where folks have lost their jobs and the museums have shut down. Now they're reopening, but they look different. So if you were mid-project on something, that's changed too. The rocks will still be there, but the way that they do stuff in the museums are different. And so, you know, what does that do to the whole thing? And similarly, what's happening in classrooms are different. And while I can visit a K-12 classroom a whole lot easier on Zoom, I don't have to drive and park and check in the office. They don't want me there as much as they did when it was face to face, because I'm only a box instead of a real live person who can do science with the kids in the classroom or observe what they're doing in the classroom. I was going to say, but I think some of those things that we've done, like Shangri-La, are they're going to be good and they may last. And so as much as none of us have been happy that we've had to go through this last year and a half as a world, let alone professionally, I think there are some good things that will that we've developed and been forced to develop that will continue.
So Laura's section that we had a student who I sat on, and she was Laura's master student, and I worked with her because she was interested in wetlands. But we have a paper that we've been discussing as to whether we can use part of the model of having scientists come and work with K-12 teachers and just include an addendum to our paper, an extra section, right, Laura, where we can talk about maybe where there's a facilitation for having a person come in virtually. That's been one of the few places I found that was almost an advantage. We had some high profile speakers be able to come to my class or my lab meetings because I just said, can you hop on Zoom, not a plane or a trip or a car, you know? And I think that I tend to look for silver linings, but I saw that as one where maybe what I would like to hang around after COVID would be that ability to interact with K through 12 classrooms more by just being a person on the wall, or invite speakers into my class or lab because they're okay coming virtually and we know we can do it.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, what's incredible. You used the word resilience. I use the word entrepreneurial or innovative. And, you know, humans are pretty successful biological species, and we're quite flexible and quite adaptable. It's in fact remarkable that. And these are just illustrations. But, you know, to the other, just to sort of end off our interview, we've talked about your work situation, to some extent your family situations, but I just wanted to emphasize to all our viewers and listeners that we're all people and we have personal lives as well. So let's end off with that. I mean, how have you kept your sanity? Have you found new hobbies, new interests? Have you started cooking soda bread like everyone seems to be doing? What's your secret for sort of keeping yourself centered and sane? I don't know who wants to kick off with this. Ted, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, hobbies wise, there's not much, but you know, I couldn't go back to the gym, so I started running a bit more outside, which was nice. But then there's always this fear of people running past you and spreading things when you didn't know about that. But I went through the home purchase process during the
boy, talk about suffering.
So, yeah, it's a horrible time to buy, but we were on the market for like 3.5 months and finally got a place. So my new hobby in 2021 has been going to look at homes, wearing masks and booties and
got it. Okay, well,
offering ungodly amounts of money for a home. So that's been, but we were successful, and so escrow should be closing in a couple weeks here. So hopefully,
congratulations! That's great. I mean, it sounds I'm thrilled and delighted, but doesn't sound exactly relaxing to me, given my experience.
So stressful. So stressful.
My God, yeah. Anyway, well done. It gets better. That's all I can say. Gianni, how about you?
Well, during the pandemic, my backyard is one of the few outdoor spaces where I can enjoy life. So I have started some new hobbies right in my own backyard. I guess what they are. They are bird watching and gardening.
Yeah, that's great. So are you, what are you growing? Are you growing utilitarian things?
I have a couple of fruit trees in the backyard. I have a persimmon tree. I have a lemon tree. I have a jujube tree. And I have planted a loquat tree recently. And I have planted roses and succulents.
Yes, that's my secret too. I've been planting things and growing things and watching things grow. And we've got actually at the moment a whole field full of California poppies. And every time I go out, it brings joy to my heart. So anyway, be that as it may. How about you, Jim?
Well, yeah, the obligatory baking bread.
Right. Okay. Check.
Tie-dye. So we've been doing a lot of different variations of tie-dye, just as a chance to kind of do something a little artistic and stuff. So yeah, I have a new collection of tie-dye t-shirts and anything else you can imagine, shorts and whatever.
Okay, well, I'm getting great vibes from this group. Laura's got a patented game going. We've got a store selling tie-dyed clothes. Our financial problems are over here. So,
let's say department fundraiser, Jim.
How about you, Christine?
I became a third grade teacher and learned a little bit about the new math. You guys can, at the end of the day, I would be like, I don't know how you got there, but 8 times 8 is 1,000% 64. So, but I that was a mixed blessing. I mean, it's hard to have a third grader at home, but I've also never been so connected with what they do in third grade and what my student is like as a student. So that was one part of our life. I think some of my other hobbies shrunk a little bit. I played a lot of indoor volleyball. That's not coming back for quite some time. But we did also one of the fairly traditional things. We purchased a super used hippie camper van. And it looked a little bit like the Scooby-Doo Mystery Machine, and we have driven it all over. And we've done a lot of backpacking because that felt like a very safe way. We drive our hippie van to a campsite, find dispersed camping, do a 2-day backpack, and then come back. And that felt very safe, away from people, and erased the memories of my trying to learn third grade math during the week.
Okay, well, fantastic. That sounds so exciting. And tomorrow we start on the 9 times table, by the way. So,
That's great.
But Laura, Henriquez, I mean, we've sort of interacted a little bit with Build and have had some great successes there. So that's terrific. But what have you done for yourself and fun?
I like to make cards. I write a lot of letters and I make greeting cards, and I'm old enough that I could do senior university. So I took an OLLI course on card engineering. So now I'm making 3D pop-up cards and cards with funky folds, and it's been a lot of fun. It's upped my game in what I can do in card making.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll give you space in the store.
Yeah, and also next to Jim's tie-dye.
If you want to sell the tie-dye and cards out of my van, you can.
Oh, perfect.
Thanks. Okay, right. We'll get the legal people on the lease, Christine. So
throw the soda bread in there and you got a deal, Christine. Yes. We can make it a taco truck / tie-dye / card store.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. And bringing up to end up our hour, Laura, what have you done? It sounds like you've had a sort of tough road to hoe at home with the person who was sensitive.
Yeah, no new hobbies, although maybe bird watching kind of, because again, but well, one thing we did is we've started to lay hardwood floors ourselves in the house, because why not? And yeah, and just actually, without my commute, I'm like a lot of people, right? They got that commute that you no longer have. The 5-second commute before class is fantastic. I'm really going to miss that. I'm going to miss it a lot. But I was just able to exercise more.
Fabulous.
So just having time to just exercise has been really kind of a treat.
You said something that's resonated so much with me. I don't know how many people know, but I have about an hour each way commute from Pasadena to Long Beach. And so not having it has been absolutely wonderful. I've suddenly got, wow, my days are 2 hours longer. And of course, in my case, they got filled with meetings almost immediately. But,
Your days are 2 hours longer now.
yeah. But still, that in fact, when I was back on campus on Thursday, I kind of had to remind myself, oh, I'm going to a meeting somewhere else. It takes some time to get there. It doesn't just happen. Oh, okay. So I was late for 3 meetings because I kept saying, oh, I think it takes 5 minutes, but it really takes 8, you know. So, anyway, well, what a great experience that I think our viewers have had, hearing about the incredible range of your experiences, your tremendous success with the pivot to an online teaching or alternative modality teaching without at the drop of a hat, how you've struggled, but some of you have succeeded in continuing your research effort, your service effort, and all through that you've maintained what I can see is a positive, productive attitude, and I'm sure that you have continued to inspire and teach your students as effectively as you did before, even though you may not think so. But judging by what I hear from students, they are incredibly grateful and really very much aware of the sacrifices you've made to keep up the Long Beach high quality experience. So thank you from them and from me. And thank you so much for taking the time at this busy time of the semester. So I guess I can say happy grading, and this too shall pass, and we'll be back and back at it before you know it. So thanks very much, and go Beach.